At least by 1984, from what has been reported, Mike, you had made it into the Hubbard sect's criminal conspiracy, probably because of the realities at that time when you were appointed a director in the newly incorporated Church of Scientology International, CSI, in 1982, you were a co-conspirator. As you know, your conspiracy is structured and operates as a techno-occult mafia family. Many of your sect's victims and critics called your operation a crime cult or a criminal cult, and I don't believe you ever challenged that label. I am sure I called your operation that myself and explained why that designation is accurate, defensible, and justified. Now, of course, with the solidification and persistence of other Scientologist sects, your operation is more properly called a, quote, crime sect or criminal sect. For years, you were not only un direttore della società, you were your sect's primo caporegime. According to reports, you were commanding officer OSA US in 1984 and CO OSA International by 1985, and you held that post for 20 or so years. As capo, OSA personnel internationally were your crew. You ran una rete di consiglieri for the boss. Rathbun was 20 years the underboss, the sotto capo. Hubbard was the boss, the capofamilia. In fact, once we flag crew came ashore from the Apollo in 1975, we commonly referred to him as the boss. He knew we called him that, and he liked it. When Hubbard died in 1986, Don Miscavige succeeded him and remains capofamilia. Hubbard went off to Bersaglio II and is a sort of capo galattico di tutti I capi galattici. I had left the Familia La Comunione at the end of 1981. By not telling the truth about your victimization of the SP class, you are still honoring or applying Scientology's omerta, its code of silence. Zinberg, who is proudly, appropriately Jewish, said in his interview, quote, my behavior as a Scientologist was the functional equivalent of a Nazi, end quote. In that analogy, which like the mob analogy is also accurate, during Zinberg's time doing covert geo-ops, Hubbard was the Führer. Und bitte entschuldigen Sie mein schlechtes Deutsch. His Scientology sect's organization form, like the Nazi org form, was a police state dictatorship. Hubbard's wife, Mary Sue, was the Stellvertreter des Führers, the deputy Führer. Jane Kember, the Guardian Worldwide, would have been the Reichsführer SS, the head of the Schutzstaffel. In 1980 and 1981, I was Führer Hubbard's personal biography researcher and archivist. Der persönliche Biografie, Forscher und Archivar. After Hubbard's death, Miscavige became the Führer. He seized Hubbard's dictatorship reins and even boasts publicly of controlling Scientology and Scientologists by, quote, policing them. Rathbun, already a high-ranking Scientolo-Nazi, became Demi-Stooge Deputy Führer, die Hauptstichwortgeberende Stellvertreter des Führer. You became Scientology's Reichsführer SS Mike, responsible on paper, as Heinrich Himmler had been, for security, surveillance, and terror. Himmler oversaw the silencing and destruction of Jews and other persons and groups the Nazi hierarchy wanted silenced or destroyed. You oversaw the silencing or destruction of SPs, who are the functional equivalent of the Jews and other human victims of the Nazis. Like many high-ranking Nazi officers or officials, you have used die Nürnberger Verteidigung for your criminal and antisocial actions. Befehl est Befehl. The defense that you were following policy and obeying your Führer's orders. You and your co-conspirators embraced what Jesse Prince called a, quote, required protocol to hate. You had to hate me and a few other SPs like me. George Orwell in 1984 had the 2 minutes of hate. Prince was a budding insider in the conspiracy between 1983 and 1986. Hubbard and Miscavige in 1984 demanded that their protocol to hate be 24/7. You have hated me in willing compliance with your conspiracy's protocol, policy, and command intention, day in and day out for 36 years. Admittedly, there could be other rationales you have latched onto for continuing to hate me and your other victims, since you claim to have freed yourself from your conspiracy's dominion, which had required you, while officially on the sect's payroll, to embrace hate as protocol. Regardless of what you might believe compels or justifies your hate, however, what I believe underlies it and anchors it and has always underlain and anchored it is cowardice. As terrible and as embarrassing as this condition can seem, it can also be viewed as a blessing because it is so easy and pleasant to heal. Prince wrote this in 2014, and this is a long quote from his blog. There were years of boardroom meeting at ASI, Author Services Incorporated, to figure out how to get rid of Gerry Armstrong, L. Ron Jr., David Mayo, and a few other people who had devoted their lives in servitude to L. Ron and his grand ideas. All of these devoted people turned out to be suppressive persons all along, according to the instructions from L. Ron via his publishing organization, ASI. It was new management's job to hunt them down and get them put in jail. It was required protocol to hate and contribute to the destruction of men and women that I had never met or laid eyes on. We would be sitting in the boardroom at L. Ron's Author Services Organization, reading advices from L. Ron, calling for the heads of staff he felt offended him somehow, listening to Miscavige and other staff, figuring out ever clever ways to get rid of the people who were aggravating poor L. Ron. There were banker boxes full of, quote, advices, which are orders, from L. Ron spewing hate-filled vitriol about Gerry. The information that Gerry provided to Russell Miller and John Atack about L. Ron's actual history did in fact expose his underbelly and pulled back the curtains on his imaginary life he expected others to believe. That you have, quote, done a lot, end quote, as Sharon Stainforth says, meaning you have done a lot of good in this period when you've been presenting as doing good, can be irrelevant to an underlying condition of cowardice. The claim, in fact, can be a pretext, and pretexts are commonly expressions or effects of cowardice. Zinberg could not but have done all sorts of human good during those 35 years after conspiring against Paulette Cooper. Yet he remained in his own eyes a coward. He must have been a coward in others' estimation as well. No one who heard his story that I have seen has said, "No, Len, you weren't a coward." People have agreed with him that for 35 years he was a coward, and also obviously agreed that by telling what he had done, he ended his long-duration cowardice. Clearly, the same condition could exist for you, and if so, something should be done about it. You have put yourself on public display and have put your character in issue for analysis, and you have done so for financial gain. You have produced a television series with Leah Remini that propagandizes yourself as courageous and truth-telling. This is what you and Remini ask of the people you approached or selected for your episodes. Be courageous and tell everyone about your experiences and knowledge. But you have not done so yourself, Mike. You have not been courageous. You have never talked about what is serious, real, and ongoing, your experiences and knowledge of your conspiracies, persecution of SPs like me. By not telling the truth about this to in some way reverse the harmful effects of the wrong you did to us, you not only remain unrepentant, but continue the persecution.